I wanted to get back to Lead for a minute. You'd mentioned that there's no dispensaries in Oregon, but basically what you're saying is that there's no licensed and regulated dispensaries. There is patient access, but unfortunately those people take chances each and every day to supply medical marijuana to patients, don't they?
The way the system is set up in Oregon is that a person can either cultivate for themselves or can designate someone to cultivate for them. They can reimburse the person that cultivates for them for supplies and utilities, but not for labor or other costs associated with production. But patients can freely share. So what's happened is the various advocacy groups in Oregon, Oregon Normal, Voter Power, Oregon Green Free, set up these events where card holders show up and obtain small quantities of medicinal cannabis at no charge. Or there's either, sometimes there's a cost associated with putting on the event that's requested, but there's no sales, there's no stores. So, and from a patient perspective, there isn't the kind of things that you have in California, for example. The Normal Conference, which this year is going to be the weekend of the 24th of September in San Francisco, a couple of years ago was in Los Angeles, and the best part for me was anyway going on a tour of some of the dispensaries, and there's so many different modalities that patients utilize to access the medicine that happen only when there are dispensaries. In that regard, and I forgot to mention two other things. One is that we're in the middle of holding hearings in Oregon to add psychiatric conditions to the list of debilitating medical conditions that qualify patients. We've had two hearings before a panel that has reviewed limited evidence provided by a retired professor of medicine. And the final hearing, Ed Glick, who's a retired psychiatric nurse, is going to present his evidence. We're also going to have testimony from various physicians from around the country, including Dr. Grinspoon in Massachusetts and Dr. Melamede in Colorado, and I spoke last night at the dinner with Dr. Bierman, and I think he's going to participate as well. And so we're real hopeful to be able to add, frankly, with 40% of the troops returning with PTSD, it's unpatriotic not to have PTSD be a list of debilitating conditions. And that's what I intend to tell the panel. And I'll tell you the same thing I told you last year, which is what KO says. If men could get PMS, medicinal cannabis would be legal everywhere. It's just true. The last thing I wanted to mention, are there any other lawyers here besides the ones on the panel? And Bill, we're having a legal conference. Is anybody that knows lawyers that is here? If you know lawyers who are involved in this work, part of what all of us try to do is to educate other people so that so much of it doesn't fall on so few. And we're holding a conference called All Things Cannabis in Portland, September 11th and 12th, which is also the weekend of the Oregon's Hempstock, which is in Portland, which is a smaller version of the Hempfest that Oregon Normal
like a blank slate right now when it comes to medical cannabis distribution, and I look forward to seeing what happens there. Well, we see Rhode Island passing legislation to do non-profit production and distribution of medical marijuana. I think that shows a good guideline of the way that these things can be, that there's a middle way between the kind of California Wild West unregulated model and the overregulation that we see otherwise. And I think what I see in Oregon is what we see in Canada as well, is that when you've got a program that's existing but that doesn't really meet the patient needs, you force patients to break the law. And that's absolutely useless when we have overregulated programs and people are forced to break the law or to take chances and risk their own personal freedoms. We can't really say we've got an effective or working medical marijuana program.
It's really true, because in Oregon the cops come to the legislature and they say, oh, there's all this abuse in the program, and they never, ever talk about the fact that there's all this cannabis that's being cultivated legally and being used legally so that patients don't have to. It's about, we estimate, about $500 million that's been taken out of the underground market because cannabis is legal in Oregon, and nobody ever talks about
what's
that.
Normal both regionally and nationally working on this year?
Well, that's a tough question. Normal, the job is to legalize marijuana, and for the last several years, a lot of what we've been involved in has been medical marijuana around the country. We're involved in a number of the various programs to get a medical marijuana initiative, involved in providing lawyers and legal education for people that have medical marijuana issues. But I'm kind of a dissenter here, and I don't want to piss anybody off, but I'd like to remind everybody that medical marijuana is not the only issue, and really, as Joanna McKee said to me, until the plant is free, no one's going to be free. And what we've experienced in many situations where a patient will go to a lawyer, and the patient and the lawyer will go to the police and the prosecutor and say, okay, this is what we want to do, what's legitimate? And having done that and more or less to receive instructions from law enforcement, they then turn around and get busted and become felons. Another problem, there's so many problems. Another problem is that, medical marijuana is fine for those privileged few among us who have doctors, who can afford doctors, or who even are informed enough on the subject to know that if you can get a doctor, you can get legitimate use of marijuana. That's not a large percentage of the population. So NORML continues to work for the freedom for all of us to put this wonderful substance to the use that we think it was intended for when it was created by whoever created it. And that includes the largest legal committee on the planet of lawyers around the country who are dedicated to representing people who are the victims of the war on marijuana. Includes lobbying, includes trying to be there when something comes up that NORML should be attending to. But while I'm talking about NORML, I should tell you, NORML is the only drug reform organization on the planet that doesn't have its own pet millionaire. Think about that. All the others have got their little millionaires to provide them with all the money we need. We survive on the donations from the people who are our constituents. And I got to tell you, constituents out there, you've been treating us pretty bad lately. It's about time you stepped up and sent some money to NORML. Thanks.
I want to ask Omar a question. I come from British Columbia, which has the best medical marijuana in the world. Yes, anybody know? Seattle actually does great, but BC, of course, is well known as an area of cannabis production and really of let's say, lowered resistance to cannabis use. But it's kind of a misnomer in many ways because British Columbia has the highest rate of drug arrests in all of Canada, the highest rate of cannabis arrests in all of Canada, and the highest per capita cannabis rate of arrests, or rate of cannabis arrests in all of Canada as well. So we're actually getting busted more in BC despite this perception that we have more freedoms. You just told me something interesting, that people are being busted for recreational use right now in San Francisco.
And also for medical cultivation in San Francisco, and they're being prosecuted in state court. Many times people think that I'm used to shouting in court, so I don't like microphones. But anyways, in California, and specifically in San Francisco, but also in Mendocino County, there's an uptick in state criminal prosecution. So many times people think California is a Shangri-La of medical marijuana, and it's like the nirvana, and there's still a lot of work to be done in California. But what I do see is when marijuana legalization is discussed, there's no question that medical marijuana is a safe issue. It becomes something that will not be touched because now legalization is on the table. So in a way, pushing for legalization of cannabis further entrenches medical cannabis and makes it a safe issue that any politician can support.
Is that true as well in Mendocino? Because I know you guys have seen a wax and a wane of support for recreational use and recreational production of cannabis over the years.
I think so. I think that a lot of what happens in Mendocino County is, unfortunately, the DA's office is prosecuting cases, but the juries aren't convicting on those cases, and that's an important thing. I just recently did a jury trial where there was over 400 pounds of processed marijuana, or at least marijuana in some stages of being processed, and the jury did not convict the individuals that were being prosecuted. And so people that do push their case to a jury trial are more likely to, if they do have a medical defense, more likely to win on that. But the system is set up to scare people into believing that their rights are not their rights, and that's kind of what happens often.
There's a stand right here for the, I think it's called the Cannabis Defense Fund, where they have a shirt that says no plea bargain, and I think that that's a good strategy for everyone. Fight for your rights, fight for your cognitive liberty.